discussing regarding, the modes of export modes. Usually there would be two, that is direct exporting and indirect exporting. Now, speaking about this, usually many manufacturing firms usually begin their global expansion usually as exporters. Now, exporting is one of the methods that organization uses as a very easy entry mode in foreign markets. In this entry method, goods and services produced in one country are offered to sell in another country through marketing and also distribution channel. So this method requires a significant investment in marketing strategies. And in reality, exporting is the most traditional and well-established form of operating in foreign markets. Now, export can either be done as direct export, that is, using an agent or a distributor or a overseas subsidiary, or can also act through a government agency, and it can also be done as an indirect export, that is products are exported through maybe trading companies, export companies, piggy banking, and also counter trade. Now, speaking about counter trade, it is one such of export mode where we as a country or we as a business organization would be importing goods from some other country only with the intention of exporting it to some other country. Now, as an entry method, exporting has several advantages compared to other methods of entering. Now, exporting is very simple and it can be started with low cost or investment and risk compared to other modes of entry. Now, other advantages of exporting could be, increased utilization of the domestic plant, and thereby the ideal capacity could be decreased and it would result in reducing unit cost through economies of scale. Now, exporting also helps in diversifying the markets, which always reduces the company exposure to domestic demand instability. Now, on the other hand, exporting will have its own disadvantages. It will always include, high transportation costs. It will also have to face trade barriers, tariffs, and problems with local agents. In addition to all this, exporters have lower control of distribution and local agents. And they'll also have to face the risk of exchange rate fluctuations. And this exporting is always subjected to custom duties and taxes in the importing countries. Now, although exporting costs are relatively low compared with the other entry methods, to enter and develop this market, exporters usually incur costs to gain exposure, and also to set up and set up business and distribution networks and attract customer. Added to this, there are chances that products might need to be modified and also redesigned, including the packaging, in order to meet the local requirements or customer preferences. Now, I guess what we discussed earlier was not audible to all of you. So, what we discussed was nothing but before entering a business market, you'll always have to, as a business, question should be answerable to three different questions. That is, which kind of markets to enter, that you'll have to do environmental scanning, and you'll have to try to understand which would give you more opportunities in the long run. And it is advisable that maybe in developed country or developing country, a business should see to that it has a free market system, and the stability of the politics is very much necessary. The inflation is low, and also the private sector debt should be low. And once after the business analyzes this, the next question that is to be answered is when to enter them and what should be the scale of entry. When we speak about when to enter and what should be the scale, usually we are trying to analyze whether we should enter once after somebody else starts the same kind of business, or are we going to be the pioneers for such market. Whenever we as a business start enter some other market for the first time, or the first one to enter would be called as first mover. And being a first mover, a business will always have its own advantages and disadvantages. Advantages is that we can always have cost benefit in terms of our competitors, and also we can, by producing very good products, we can always bind our customers to our company even though competition arises, and thereby increase the market demand. Okay, and also by doing all this, definitely the sales volume would always be more. But the disadvantages of first mover is that the organization will always have to bear something called as pioneer cost, or the cost that should be borne because of some of the researching that has to be done. And also there might be chances that the regulations would be changed. Now, the last question that is to be answered is how to enter, or the choice of entry mode. Whatever we have discussed earlier when we were discussing the strategic alliances of having all such methods of entry, which one should we choose? Will it be a merger? Are we going to acquire something, or are we going to start as a wholly new subsidiary, or is it just that we act as an exporter? All these questions are to be answered. Okay, so then the next thing that we had to discuss was factors to be considered before entering. That is nothing but timing of the entry and also the scale of the entry. Timing of the entry speaks about the advantages of first mover and also the disadvantage of being a first mover. Okay, and scale of entry tells that what happens when we enter to other foreign market in a large scale, and what happens when we enter other foreign markets in small scale. Usually when we enter large scale, it would always imply rapid entry, and also it requires a business to have commitment towards many significant resources, maybe like capital resource, human resource, technological resource, and the commitment is also necessary for a long run. Whereas on the other hand, small scale entry is a way, just to gather the information about the foreign market. But usually when we compare large scale entry and small scale entry, the lack of commitment which is associated with the small scale entry will always make it more difficult for the small scale entrants to build a market share or to capture the first mover advantage. Later we discussed regarding the different types of export modes, and the exporting has its own advantages and disadvantages. Now we already discussed regarding that, but to mention each point by point, the advantages, the exporting is well established form of operating in foreign market. Now, when it comes to exporting, it is nothing but the marketing of goods produced in one country into another country. At the same time, no direct manufacturing is required in a foreign country, or but major investments in the market would be compulsory. Now, it can be any company. Before committing its resources to project in export business, should always, analyze the benefits and disadvantages of exporting. The advantages is that definitely you will have your sales in your domestic country. When you go for other foreign country, there would be increased sales, and because of this increased sales, the profits definitely going to increase. Okay, that is to tell, but before having this increased sales and profit, the company have to bear something called as development cost. That is to tell, you might have been producing a product in the one country or in your home country, but when you enter a foreign market, definitely it would require some kind of changes need to be made, either in terms of customer taste and preference, or to meet some kind of legal regulation. So once after this development costs have been covered, then there is increase in overall profitability because of additional foreign sales in the long term. The next one is magnifying domestic competitiveness. Now the majority of the companies gain competitiveness in domestic market before they would have gone international. So this always help companies to possess some strategies that will also help them internationally. So now that a company is going international, it will always help it to gain global market share. Now by exporting, international companies can participate in the global market and thereby gain their share from huge international markets. The next one is diversification. Now, by selling in more than one market, it will allow companies to branch out their business and spread out their risk. That is to tell, when you are not at all dependent upon only one nation, the risk of depending on only one kind of people would also be less. Now, after entering foreign market, companies will not be affected by the changes of business cycle of domestic market or one particular country. The next advantage is low cost. Now, entering foreign market will usually increase the scale of production to meet foreign demand, and this enlarged production would lower unit costs and also help in greater utilization of existing capacities. Okay, then one more advantage is it always indemnify for seasonal demands. Now, if a company is producing such a product or service that that are used in certain seasons domestically, then by entering foreign markets, the demand will be available during different seasons also. And it can also have the advantages of selling excess production capacity. Whenever a company has excess production capacity for any reason, and if the demand is not going to increase anymore in the domestic market, then the capacity will have to be kept idle. In those cases, when it goes for foreign business, it can always sell out its excess production capacity. And definitely, when you enter an international or a different market, every organization will get valuable information about all these new marketing techniques, maybe new technologies, and also foreign competitors. Now, this knowledge can assist the company in both the market, in both domestic and also international or foreign business. And this exporting has its own challenges. Now, the first one is extra cost. Mostly, it takes more time to build up extra markets, which would be characterized by the longer payback, high upfront cost for developing, new products or changing the design of the product, and also with other administrative costs associated to the marketing of the product. And speaking of that, definitely the next one is regarding the product modification. Now, for exporting, companies have to remold their products to satisfy the needs and wants of foreign country, not only in terms of customer, but also the securities codes have to be met, and also some of the important restriction. Now, modification is often required to meet the importing countries packaging and labeling requirements also. The next disadvantage is that it has financial risk involved. Now, even if so many methods are available for collection of payments, like might be consignment, open account, documentary collection, and letter of credit, but all these are very much tedious, which involves a lot of paperwork and also complicated than that of domestic sales. So thus companies always consider the financial risk implicated in doing international transaction. And the next one is market information. Now, getting information of foreign markets is more difficult and is also time consuming than getting information and analyzing domestic markets. Okay. Now, there is one more demerit, which is export license and documentation. Now, though the trend is that exporting licensing requirements should be less, but some companies are required to obtain an exporting license to export their goods, and this makes them less competitive. In many cases, the documentation is mandatory to export in more than for what documentation they'll have to make for domestic sales. Okay, as we discussed earlier, the types of export modes can be direct export, it can be indirect export, and also cooperative export. Okay, now speaking about all these things, there are advantages of direct exporting, its own disadvantages. Now, speaking about direct exporting includes, selling directly to target customers in market. Now, this can be done by, you know, by frequent visits of trade, or by establishing a branch or company in the target country, or even through nowadays through internet. Now selling directly to customer prevents other business taking parts in your margin. However, in this approach, a large requirement of human and financial resources is always necessary, and also it takes time to make contacts and relationship to carry out marketing in other countries. Now, advantages of direct exporting is that a company can always control the price. Also, it can, make its brand complete in other countries. It can always understand the buyers directly, that is to tell their needs and preferences can be understood by the exporters themselves, and it also gives an ability to customize the product or design the product according to their taste and preferences. Now disadvantages is that now it requires investment on different assets, and the investment also would be huge. Not only that, it requires time, staff resource, and also very much the financial resources. Now, fluency what a company has in domestic market is also necessary for after sales commissioning and services when it comes for other different countries also, because when we are exporting or directly to the customers, maybe they wouldn't be very well with the language that we speak. And also the disadvantage is that timely troubleshooting is almost done remotely, and it will always require additional visits. Now speaking about indirect export, in this selling is through an intermediary, and it is relatively cheap and would always be straightforward way to enter a new market. Now intermediaries are nothing but our agents based in target export market who sell products or services to end users. Now intermediaries should have in-market experience and contacts very well. Now speaking about advantages, now exporters can make use of contracts in operating or marketing worldwide. Now commission rates give high motivation to agents, and this helps in getting their cooperation and can enter and capture the market soon. The disadvantages is that now the intermediaries will always require sales support. Now these intermediaries also will take what we call as margin or something you need to pay for them. Now there would be no any direct contact with the end customer of or to the manufacturer. Now the manufacturer also has the disadvantages that he will have little control over the actual financial transaction. Now most of the times by using indirect export, the manufacturer cannot even learn about the overseas market, and because of this, in the long run, when it comes to expansion, it might prove as a little bit disadvantages for the company, as it will not be supporting the rapid growth of the business organization. Now, speaking about the cooperative export, now In this, what happens is that the firms, whatever entry mode we were speaking of, maybe especially like merger or joint venture. Now, under this, the firms enter into collaborative agreement with other firms to produce product to export. Now, small firms usually do not have sufficient scale of economies in manufacturing because of the size of the local market or marketing sources available, or due to the inadequacy of management. So, by cooperation, the firms can achieve economies of scale and thereby do the business. So, for this session, uh, let us wind it up here.